This is Powering the Future, a podcast series brought to you by Smart Grid Forums. One planet, one power grid.
What if the future of the grid wasn't built in silos, but in the open? Jonas van den Bogaard from Alliander joins us to explain how open source principles are helping utilities collaborate and build a more resilient energy system. Jonas, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome on board to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, fantastic. Before we get started with the conversation, Jonas, perhaps you can give us a quick overview of your role and responsibilities at Alliander.
So Alliander is a distribution system operator here in the Netherlands. So we are responsible for a large part of the distribution grid here in the Netherlands, 1/3 to be exactly, where we make sure that we provide reliable, affordable, and accessible energy to our customers and businesses. My role at Alliander is twofold. So on one side, I am a digital strategy lead at Alliander. So I help our digitalization organization to define our strategy, what's coming ahead of us in terms of opportunities, but also in terms of challenges. But my key focus is the opportunities around co-creation and partnerships. Where open source, where we're going to talk about more about later, it plays a key role. And my second role in Alliander is that I also lead the open source program office in our organization, which is our key knowledge center around open source in the broader sense for that topic.
Fantastic. So in terms of open source within the grid environment, what would you say are the benefits of working with open source over closed systems?
So maybe a little bit background on that question, because in the situation in the Netherlands is that we see that the Dutch energy transition requires a lot of work. We have to substantially extend our grid, and the resulting and doubling of the work what we have to do in the next few years. And digitization plays a key role here. It is to support this energy transition. And one of the things where we see that open source and open innovation comes to play is it helps us to scale up digitalization efforts, but also create new digital innovations, which we very much are in high need.
What do you think the grid sector can learn from the tech sector in regard to open source? There is still a little bit of hesitance that we sense from grid operators in terms of full adoption of open source. What can we learn from the tech sector?
If you look to the broader tech sector, you see that open source in the mainstream tech sector is already the default for shared foundational tools. It's hard to imagine, for example, any tech stack in any company without open source software. To give you a few examples, Kubernetes is the leading open source platform to host containerized applications, which we also use in our organization, and many other organizations use as well. And you also have other open source technologies from the IT stack like PostgreSQL, which is the leading database these days for all kinds of data. And also many companies in our sector use it to store grid data, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Some might say, though, that tech in general isn't as mission critical as infrastructure, as the power grid. So what are the lessons that we can take across without putting the grid at any sort of risk?
So there's one large misunderstanding about open source that still coexist. And that is that open source is less secure or less suitable for mission critical environments. But when we take a look at research, for example, Gartner did a lot of research in this theme, and they say that 95% of all organizations use open source software in mission critical environments. It's literally the open source software is in the cars we drive every day. A large part of the software in those cars that run those cars is based on open source software. The trains which we drive also depend highly on open source software. Even the rockets we send to the moon depend on open source software. So it's not the question if open source can be used in mission critical environments. It's more the question about how can we apply open source technology in those environments, and how can we also build up the capabilities and knowledge to do that in a way it's safe, secure, and compliant. And I think that's very similar with any kind of technology. Safety and security is never guaranteed. It takes effort, it takes knowledge, it takes resources to do that in a way that's safe and secure.
What is the advice you would give other utilities who are perhaps at the early stages of embarking on this open source journey? What would you say are the risks and the complexities that they must manage at the beginning to make sure they have a really successful experience?
One thing we see is that the energy system becomes more dynamic. That comes with the rise of renewables, but also with EVs and but also new IT technologies like AI. And so you see that grid operators need to adopt more quickly. And one of the challenges they face in this need to be more adaptable is that vendor lock-in often restricts them to move quickly or change or innovate. And also limits in a part of sense interoperability, because if you are very locked in one specific solution, it works really well with the solution in that ecosystem, but it might be hard to connect to other ecosystems and there hinder collaboration and scalability. So one of the things I think utilities could do is, first of all, build up the open source capability in turn and learn about what open source is, what it can bring for your organization, but also help to also do it in a way which is responsible and sustainable, and by manage the risk correctly, and also understand how you can apply it in a way that strategically aligns with your broader strategy and your strategy goals.
Right, okay. Could you give us an example of an open source use case that you've implemented at Alliander? What's been the experience, what's been the results, and what's the future roadmap for that use case?
I think there's multiple open source tools which we developed at Alliander and brought open source, and also open source tools which were built by others and used internally. But that's too many to dive into all. So let me pick at least one of them, and if we have time, we may can do a second one. So one of them is OpenStaff. It's about short-term energy forecasting, which is a capability which gets more and more important for us as a company, because getting insight in what the load and will be in the next 48 hours on the grid, in both in terms of production, but also in consumption, gives us a lot of insight in the stability and usage of the grid. And it allows us to make sure that if there's chances on a risk on congestion, we identify it ahead of time. And also if we see that maybe is a lot of grid capacity available and not used, we may be able to provide large customers with extra capacity in those moments of time. And the short-term energy forecasting and the OpenStack projects plays a key role in this business capability, since it provides the software, which is the engine to create those predictions, which uses real-time measurement data, weather forecasts, but also market prices and other relevant data to determine what the load in the next 48 hours will be on a 15-minute basis. And what's so great is that we used to develop this internally, but by making it open source, it allows us to co-develop it with other partners like R2E, the French transmission system operator, but also vendors like Sichholm, which are very active in the northern countries and also rolling out OpenStaff at several DSOs in Sweden. It allows us to collaborate with others and bundling those resources, both from the developer perspective, but also from a financial perspective. And it helps us in that way to scale up innovation towards the future, but also share those costs of those scaling up this innovation with a broader set of users and participants.
Well, Jonas, you recently spoke at SGT25 in The Hague about a couple of the open source use cases that you're responsible for at Alliander. What was the response from the wider community, from those outside of your immediate network who had listened to your presentations and heard about it for the first time?
So there were multiple reactions, and some of them were were surprised about the role open source can also play in sectors like the energy sector. So it, as already mentioned, it's already a default in the tech industry. But also bringing open source to vertical sectors like the energy sector is something not everyone was aware of. And also to see also open source practical examples of what open source can bring for our sector. For example, I was talking about the forecasting, made it also very visual for the audience for, hey, open source brings also benefit beyond the tech industry. It can also help to innovate, especially innovations in the digital space related to energy. And also allows us and provides us a way of working that stimulates co-creation, but also removes some barriers about traditional ways of how we collaborate in our sector, which open source can help to make that more smoothly and sufficient.
Fantastic. Well, my final question for you is the future of open source for the power grid. What are your predictions about how far this can go and how much it can impact the grid?
And so Europe's energy transition, and I would even say the global energy transition, demands digitalization. There's no question about that. And I think open source will enable us in that transition. Through it allows us to create scalable and shared innovations across borders, both on a European level, but even on a global level. And also it increases transparencies and trust in those digital solutions, because they are not a part of one organization or that is located in one particular area of the world. And now the code and software is from us all. And it's also for everyone open to see, to download. And third, I think it will also lower the cost. Open source will allow us to build on each other's innovations and stimulate us to reuse instead of reinventing the wheel over and over again. And we already see with the LF Energy, which is the open source ecosystem for the energy space, that's really growing momentum, with including utilities like RTE, Tenet, but also recently Hydro-Quebec from Canada and Southern California Edison from the States joining that initiative. And that open source is also really a global effort and a global collaboration of bringing digital innovation in the energy space together and to build those digital innovations we need to make the energy transition a success.
So cross-border collaboration, cost efficiency, and driving innovation, 3 very good reasons why to back open source. Thank you so much, Jonas. We look forward to seeing you again at HGT 26 in Paris and building on this discussion about how open source can benefit the grid sector. Thank you for now. We look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching and listening to Powering the Future. Make sure you follow Smart Grid Forums on LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more conversations shaping the grid.
This is Powering the Future, a podcast series brought to you by Smart Grid Forums. One planet, one power grid.